the tools that the central bank has at their disposal are very blunt objects, and there's no room for nuance, really. There's only two possible outcomes. Either they keep raising rates and crash the entire economy worse than we saw in the Depression of the 1930s, or they're going to reverse course and engage in another round of money printing, and that would imply hyperinflation. Even Jack Dorsey saw the hyperinflation writing on the wall 6 months ago. Michael Saylor eloquently described what's happening as the melting ice cube, right? A lot of smart people have been warning about this for a while. I think that what we can say is that at some point the Fed will choke and they'll go back to massive money printing, and then the inflation will get really nasty. So then that's when you have, that's when you have gas at $10 a gallon. That's when you have food doubling and tripling again in price. That's when you have housing taking another huge leap higher. And so that's going to be the end of the post-war period of what some would call the American empire. So it lasted from 1940s to 2022, 2023. That was the American empire. That was the period. So that's it.
It's all hope and optimism and liberation. When I walked in to places like Ilopango, Soyapango, Apopa in particular, these are places that were occupied by violent thugs for the past 30 years, sent from the United States, from the prisons of California. They've been liberated from those thugs. They've also been emancipated from the US dollar system through Bitcoin. Their leader is obviously a Lorenzo de Medici of our day. There's Renaissance 2.0. There's Enlightenment 2.0. What's not to feel good about, right? When you look from here to the United States, and we return to the United States, quite often for visits. And but it doesn't take far to look to see the entropy setting in. I just saw a chart of the parabolic surge in the number of people in our legislative branch of the United States who are over 70. So, these guys have set in motion the decline of our empire with the introduction of 50 years ago, the US dollar as all fiat, and thus all the stuff that followed through, the hollowing out of the US economy that was necessary in order to maintain their power for a temporary 50-year period. And you see despair. You see homeless camps across California, which is one of the largest economies in the world, allegedly. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see the difference between the two. Anybody who comes here to El Salvador, we just had our friend, the guy who has edited all our content for the past 15 years. He and his family came from the United Kingdom here. And of course, they Googled it. And even though they know us, it's hard to overlook the headlines from the BBC, from the Guardian, from the Wall Street Journal, from the New York Times, from the Washington Post, from the New Yorker. All of these mainstream authoritative media that the likes of Twitter will use as authorities on what is truth. Well, their truth that they tell people is that don't go to El Salvador. It's dangerous, it's violent, and it's a place of despair. Well, as soon as anybody arrives, and this happened to me and Max, of course, when we first arrived, is they see the reality is completely different from the headlines and the truth that they say, that they try to push. It's a fake narrative that they push about what El Salvador is.
Really, going back to what we said at the beginning about inflation, the mainstream media was warning about deflation for years, and the mainstream media didn't think all that money printing would have any consequences. and the inflation genie's out of the bottle. They said it was transitory. And all as a chorus, they've been pushing pro Wall Street propaganda, and we saw all the propaganda pushed on behalf of the mRNA stuff. That's turned out to be massive psyops. And so now you've got the same machinery in place, all in lockstep, without a single dissenting voice in American mainstream media, pushing the same talking points concerning El Salvador. And well, one phrase in particular stands out from what you just read, and that would be dismantling democracy. So the reason this is patently false and demonstrably false is that the president of El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender, and in so doing gave 7 million Salvadorans the right to unconfiscatable, uncensorable wealth and property. Now, this is decentralization, democracy. Okay, this is the complete opposite of the claim of dismantling this democracy. It reveals that the notion of democracy in the American press is no longer consistent with that as expressed in the Constitution and the founding documents of the U.S. The U.S. The phrase the quote that you're talking about that I said was that Bitcoin is a mirror that exposes people in a way. If you're a bad person, it exposes you to be a worse person. If you're a good person, it tends to show you in even a better light. Michael Saylor was an unknown CEO, and Bitcoin made him into a Bitcoin legend. The founder of the BSV project was already on shaky grounds in terms of mental stability, and Bitcoin turned him into a full-fledged psychopath. Right, so that's the power of Bitcoin. It's a force multiplier. So it's revealing the fact that the press in America is sadly in a sad state where the truth is seen as the enemy of the state. And when you're talking about money that separates for the first time money from the state, well, the state's going to not like that. And so all media in America is state-sponsored media. Rolling Stone is state-sponsored media. CNN, state-sponsored media. There is no independent, non-state-sponsored media, with very, very, very few exceptions. I can think of only maybe one journalist who's flirting with challenging the empire on Fox. But other than that, you just have essentially the deplatforming that goes on. And it's also from El Salvador, you get to see the United States with a bit of perspective. And it's a bit sad to see a once great nation become insecure and fumble so horribly with concepts like freedom. They've completely lost the plot in the US, I'm sorry to say.